OEA. This is Amanda Ewing, and I'm glad that you're joining us for our weekly Top 4 at 4, where we talk about the top 4 legislative issues in education this week. We've got a big room full of folks today. Joining us, as always, we have Chanson Flick, the Legislative and Political Organizing Specialist for the Western Oklahoma.
Howdy, y'all.
We've got Ivy Riggs, the LPO Specialist for Eastern Oklahoma. Hello. We've got our Executive Director, David Duvall.
Good afternoon.
Vice President, Alicia Priest.
Bueno.
And President of OEA, Linda Hampton.
Good afternoon.
And then, of course, we can't forget Lauren Burkholder, our webinar extraordinaire, who's a part of our communications center and keeping this actually functioning.
Hey, guys.
So the 4 main topics we're going to talk about this week are, 1, that it is a deadline week. Chanson's going to tell you about what that means. 2, charter legislation. 3, voucher bills that are remaining. And 4, the deaf interpreter certification bill that's received a lot of press and attention this week, and you've probably or may have heard about. So let's jump right in. Chanson, tell us about the deadline week, which means we are almost to the end of the 4th week of the legislative session, and that means there are only 12 to go, so we're a quarter of the way through session.
Slowly getting there. Committee deadlines for this week were in both chambers are later just tomorrow and the next day. So this is mostly a very joyous occasion, as a large number of the bills will die for this legislative session. I say it's a mostly joyous situation, as some of the good legislation will kind of get caught up in that whole mess. So any Senate bills that are not heard by tomorrow, the 26th, and any House bills not heard by Friday, the 27th, will no longer be eligible for hearings this legislative session this year. The next step in the process is going to be a floor hearing in the Chamber of Origin. So House bills have to be heard in the House, Senate bills have to be heard in the Senate, at which point the bills will switch chambers and the process starts all over again. I do want to mention that if the numbers hold that I've just kind of tallied up on this, we are looking at nearly 66% of the education bills that we are tracking are going to disappear by this Friday. So I expect that number to kind of go up a little bit, so we'll have to kind of wait and see how the remaining committees tonight and tomorrow go. Just to highlight a couple of wins that we've gotten through on this deadline, we've managed to stop Senate Bill 171 by Senator Lovelace, which was statewide charter expansion, and House Bills 2003 and 2004, both by Representative Jason Nelson. 2003 would have been a voucher bill. We managed to get that one shut down in committee. And 2004 would have been an expansion of the Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship, which basically would have ended up being a backdoor voucher program.
Okay, so moving on to the second issue, charters, or statewide expansion of charters more specifically. There are 2 bills still alive that work towards statewide expansion, or would be statewide expansion. And they've now made it through committee, so they are headed to full House and Senate floor votes. One of those is Senate Bill 782 by Senator Jolly, and the other is House Bill 1696 by Representative Denny. Now, both of these are full expansion of charters, but they were amended in a lot of ways in their committee hearings this week. Primarily, the amendments included the local district being the entity that will approve or deny that charter's application for the district. And then the local district is the initial appellate body also that the charter would have to appeal to if they'd been denied. They'd have to make that second attempt by approaching the local district again. Now, they would allow the State Board of Education to override denials, a certain number of those per year, 5 or 10. Some of this is not real clear yet because in committee, a lot of these amendments were actually kind of done on the fly verbally, and so it'll be another day or 2 before we see the full written version that's headed to the House and Senate. There's still kind of works in progress, but, you know, good amendments aside, what this comes down to for us is that, you know, as that the OEA opposes the statewide expansion of charter schools. And I think some good reasons for that, were you to have conversations about this with folks, is that, for one, it's an odd contradiction that the folks who want to expand charters and increase the number of school sites in our state are usually, I guess, the same people who want to consolidate our schools. So, you know, there's definitely a contradiction there in we're going to create more schools but get rid of some of them. Now, we all know that there isn't remotely enough money to go around to fund our existing public schools, so I would definitely think that that's a good reason to not be creating any more schools at the moment. And then there's another bill, actually, that would this year increase the funding to charter schools, because they're saying that without the ability to do bonds and without access to some of the other money available to non-charters, they don't have enough money as it is right now. So if we already aren't funding charters enough, and we know we aren't funding non-charters enough, then I feel pretty strongly, and we all do, that we don't need to be creating any more charters right now. So moving on to the third topic of vouchers, Chanson mentioned the great news that both of Representative Nelson's voucher bills are dead. But what is remaining is Senate Bill 609 by Senator Jolly. Now, it is called a Scholarship Act, but it's vouchers just like always. One amendment that was made to his bill this week, though, would no longer allow any money to be available for homeschooling in any way. So the bill says that 80% of the weighted state aid will follow the student to the private school of their choice, and that money can be used, actually a parent gets a debit card basically to use on private school tuition, textbooks, tutoring, or anything left over can go towards college or career tech tuition. Now, the remaining 20% of that funding will stay at the district, and so there's a lot of disagreement right now about whether or not this bill would result in an overall increase or decrease in per pupil expenditures at a school site. But as we all know, the fixed costs for a school remain the same, even if you lose a student here or there in various grades. It's not going to save you any, teaching positions or any bus routes. And so, we know that this is going to be a decreased public school funding as a whole. And so, again, it comes down to principle for us. Public funds should be spent on public education, and that's a hard line. So we are going to fight Senate Bill 609, and we'll talk to you a little more about how we can do that before we sign off today. Ivy, why don't you tell us about the deaf interpreter certification?
So in yesterday's Common Education Committee, yesterday afternoon, Representative Sally Kern presented her House Bill 1512. It does a couple of things. It would be an increase in certification requirements for interpreters for the deaf and hearing impaired. So we've gotten a lot of mixed feedback from our members. We've gotten a ton of contact from our members. There are a few of our members that have called the contact to ask us to support this bill. They are already certified at this higher requirement level, and they would like for everyone to be required to be certified at the higher requirement level. But the majority of the feedback that we've gotten are asking for opposition of the bill for a couple of reasons. These are not highly paid employees, and so to require an extra certification, a lot of them would not go to get that, so we would lose that manpower. This is already a high shortage area. Yesterday in committee, COSA got up and talked about districts that have had jobs posted for years for interpreters, especially in our rural areas. So we already have a shortage, so as much as we want our kids to get the best education possible, to increase the requirements in an area that already has a huge shortage would be a detriment. So the people that they already have hired as interpreters would not be able to fill those jobs anymore if this bill were to pass. There is one thing that the bill does that we are in favor of, and there was some discussion in maybe modifying the bill. It did pass out of committee, but it's increasing communication between the districts and the State Department, kind of creating a directory of sorts where districts could go when they need an interpreter, kind of in partnership with the Department of Rehabilitative Services. That's who's training the interpreters. So we're in favor of that, of course. Always communication is good, but we're opposed to the increase in certification.
All right, so those are our top 4. Just a few quick notes before we sign off. We've talked about payroll deduction throughout session, and we will be emailing you on Friday. Actually, if you receive the email about this webinar, you'll receive our Friday legislative update, and so you can expect in that we'll update you on what's going on with payroll deduction. We're at a lull at this moment, but we are well into our strategizing and targeting specific legislators that will be the next to vote on this bill, and so we'll give you more information about that on Friday. Those of you who are following the APUSH, AP US History debacle by Representative Fisher, he's been saying he's pulling his bill back and is going to rewrite it, but accompanying all of those statements are the same things he's been saying about AP US History and the standards and not being patriotic enough and all of that. So we're not real optimistic that any new version is going to be significantly better. So we've got an open letter from Oklahoma's history teachers to the legislature that we're trying to get history teachers around the state to sign on to, and on Friday we'll provide you a link to that letter, and please help us do all you can to recruit history teachers at your school to sign on to that letter. All we need is an email to Lisa Cobb, actually at lcobb@okea.org, to let her know that I'm a history teacher at this school, this grade, and I want to sign the letter, and we're hoping to send that to the legislature very soon. So, and then also on Friday in the email, expect a full list of all the education legislation that we are tracking at the end of this week. That will hopefully be a lot more manageable list than what we've had so far, and it will include all of the bills that we've mentioned in this call. So, as usual, trying to keep it to 10 minutes or as close to that as possible, so that you can have a quick update each week on what's going on in session. So thank you very much for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.